My name is Jennifer, and I thought I knew what family meant. Every Sunday for 3 years, I'd wake up early to prep for dinner at the Thompson house. Jake would roll over, mumbling, "You don't have to do this every week," but I did. I wanted his family to love me the way I loved their son. The ritual was sacred to me. I'd arrive at 2 p.m. sharp with homemade apple pie, Mrs. Thompson's favorite. The dining room always smelled like lavender and old wood, with her grandmother's china displayed in perfect rows. Everything in that house had history, tradition, meaning. I desperately wanted to be part of it. "Jennifer, dear, would you mind serving the tea?" Mrs. Thompson would ask, gesturing toward her prized silver tea service. I'd carefully pour the Earl Grey into those delicate porcelain cups, the ones she only brought out for family. The weight of that word used to make my chest warm. Family. I belonged somewhere. But this Sunday felt different. The moment I walked through that familiar oak door, something shifted. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately sensed you were the topic of conversation? The way voices drop just a fraction too late, how eyes dart away when you make contact, that suffocating feeling that everyone knows something you don't? Jake barely looked up from his phone when I kissed his cheek. His sister Emma gave me a tight smile, the kind that doesn't reach your eyes. "And, Mrs. Thompson?" She watched me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "How lovely that you could join us," she said, emphasizing "you," like it was a surprise I'd shown up to our weekly tradition. I was just telling Jake about the Morrison's daughter. She just graduated law school, summa cum laude. Such an accomplished young woman. I've learned to recognize the setups, the casual mentions of other women's achievements, always delivered with that particular tone that made me feel small. I'd started bringing my own accomplishments to these dinners. My work as a financial advisor, the clients I'd helped retire early, the investment strategies I'd developed. But somehow my successes always got redirected back to how lucky Jake was to have someone so practical. The conversations would halt whenever I entered a room, mid-sentence stops that felt like slamming doors. I'd catch fragments. "Not sure Jake deserves. Think about his future." I know you've felt this too. That horrible sensation of being the outsider in your own relationship, when the people who should welcome you instead make you feel like you're auditioning for a role you'll never get. "Jennifer, would you help me in the kitchen?" Mrs. Thompson's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. As I followed her, I heard Jake's voice, barely above a whisper. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" My blood turned cold. Sure about what? I slowed my steps, straining to hear more. "Jake needs someone better," came Mrs. Thompson's reply, sharp and final. "Someone who understands what this family represents." Someone better. Those words hit me like ice water. I stood frozen in the doorway between the dining room and kitchen, watching Mrs. Thompson's reflection in the chrome refrigerator. She was smiling, not the warm maternal smile she showed at Sunday dinners, but something calculating, predatory. That's when I noticed the manila envelope on the kitchen counter. Thick, official-looking papers peeked out from the top, legal documents. My hands trembled as I reached for the tea tray, my mind racing through possibilities, none of them good. "Oh, Jennifer." Mrs. Thompson's voice was honey-sweet again as she returned. Perfect timing. I was just about to serve dessert. She lifted the ornate silver teapot, the one that had been in her family for 4 generations, and I watched my reflection warp and distort in its surface. Something was about to happen, something that would change everything. And as Mrs. Thompson carried that teapot toward the dining room where Jake sat with those mysterious papers, I realized this wasn't just Sunday dinner. This was an execution. The envelope wasn't just sitting on the counter. It was positioned, staged, ready for its moment. And as I followed Mrs. Thompson back to that perfectly set table with its perfectly arranged family, I understood that I was walking into a trap that had been months in the making. Jake, honey, Mrs. Thompson said, settling the teapot directly in front of me, showed Jennifer what we discussed. Have you ever wondered what it feels like when your world starts crumbling? It doesn't happen all at once. It's a slow-motion disaster where you can see every piece falling, but you're powerless to stop it. That's exactly how I felt as Jake's hand moved toward that envelope, his eyes finally meeting mine with something that looked almost like pity. But here's what they didn't know about me, what they couldn't have known. While they saw a quiet wife who brought homemade pies and poured tea with steady hands, I was actually watching, learning, documenting. Because 3 years of subtle insults and carefully orchestrated humiliations had taught me one crucial lesson: never trust people who smile while they're stabbing you. The truth about Sunday dinners at the Thompson house wasn't family bonding. It was psychological warfare, and I'd been losing battles I didn't even know I was fighting. But wars? Wars require strategy, and I'd been developing mine for longer than they realized. You see, there's a difference between being quiet and being weak, between observing and being passive. I'd spent months watching this family's dynamics, understanding their fears, their insecurities, their pressure points. And while Mrs. Thompson thought she was orchestrating my downfall, I'd been building something far more powerful than her petty manipulations. I had evidence, recordings, documentation of every slight, every manipulation, every calculated cruelty delivered with a smile and a side of Earl Grey. Because my background wasn't just bringing home steady paychecks, I was a financial advisor who specialized in protecting assets during hostile divorces. I knew how to build cases, how to gather evidence, how to prepare for war. But the most important thing I'd learned: sometimes the best revenge isn't fighting back immediately. Sometimes it's letting your enemies think they've won while you systematically dismantle everything they think they control. As Mrs. Thompson lifted that teapot with a smile that could cut glass, and Jake's fingers fumbled with divorce papers that had my name already filled in, I made a decision that would change all our lives forever. I was about to give them exactly what they asked for, just not in the way they expected. The hot tea hit my blouse like liquid fire, soaking through the silk I'd carefully chosen to impress his family. Mrs. Thompson's gasp was perfectly rehearsed, her hand flying to her mouth in mock horror. "Oh my goodness, I'm so clumsy. Jennifer, I'm terribly sorry." But her eyes weren't sorry. They were satisfied, triumphant even. "Jake needs someone better," she announced to the suddenly silent dining room, her voice carrying that particular tone she used when delivering verdicts. "Someone who won't embarrass this family." The envelope appeared on the table like magic, or like it had been waiting for this exact moment. Jake's hands shook as he pushed it toward me, unable to meet my eyes. "Jennifer, we think it's for the best. Divorce papers. Pre-signed, pre-dated. The ink still smelled fresh. Do you know what it's like to realize you've been living a lie? That the man you loved, the family you'd tried so hard to join, had been planning your exit strategy while you were planning your future? The betrayal wasn't just the tea or the papers. It was the Sunday dinners, the fake smiles, the 3 years of making me believe I could earn my place at their table. But here's what they miscalculated. They thought I'd crumble, cry, beg, maybe throw my own tantrum to match their drama. Instead, I sat there, tea dripping from my chin, and smiled. "You're absolutely right," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the chaos in my chest. "Jake does need someone better." Mrs. Thompson's satisfaction flickered for just a moment. That wasn't the script she'd written. I stood up slowly, tea still dripping from my ruined blouse, and looked around that dining room one last time. The family portraits on the walls, the inherited china, the silver service that had been passed down through generations, all of it representing tradition, legacy, belonging, everything I'd thought I wanted. "Thank you for showing me who you really are," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. All of you. Jake finally looked up, confusion replacing the guilt in his eyes. Jennifer, please don't make this harder than what? I interrupted. Harder than 3 years of Sunday dinners where you all took turns making me feel inadequate? Harder than listening to you discuss my flaws like I wasn't sitting right there? Or harder than discovering you've been planning this little performance while I was planning our anniversary dinner? The silence in that room was deafening. Emma shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat. But Mrs. Thompson? She doubled down. This family has standards, she said, lifting her chin with that imperious authority she wore like armor. Jake deserves someone who understands her place. And that's when something inside me finally snapped, not into anger. I'd moved past anger months ago, into clarity. Crystal clear, laser-focused understanding of exactly who these people were and what they'd been doing to me. More importantly, what I was going to do about it. You're right, I said again, reaching into my purse. He does deserve someone who understands her place, someone who knows her worth, someone who doesn't accept being treated like a second-class citizen in her own relationship. I pulled out my phone, the screen still glowing from the voice recording app I'd activated the moment Mrs. Thompson asked me to help in the kitchen. 3 years of Sunday dinners had taught me to always be prepared. I have something for you too, I said, holding up the device. A little gift to remember this lovely family tradition. Mrs. Thompson's face went white as she realized what she was looking at. The timestamp showed 23 minutes of recorded conversation, including her coaching Jake on the timing, her practice surprise at the accidental tea spill, and most importantly, her admission that this had all been planned. Jennifer, Jake stammered, finally understanding that this wasn't going according to their script. What are you? I'm giving you exactly what you want, I said, signing the divorce papers with steady hands. Your freedom, your perfect family dynamic, your house where you can continue playing these sick little games without an audience. But then I looked up at Mrs. Thompson, and my smile became something she'd never seen before. But here's the thing about games, I continued. I've been playing longer than you think, and I'm much better at it than you realized. I gathered my purse, straightened my tea-stained blouse, and headed toward the door. But before I left, I turned back one last time. Oh, and Mrs. Thompson, you might want to check your bank statements tomorrow. Turns out, when you're married to someone in finance, you learn interesting things about joint accounts and automatic transfers, especially the ones that have been funding your little European shopping trips. The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. You see, I've been documenting everything for months, every transaction, every manipulation, every lie told at these charming Sunday dinners. And now I have something much more valuable than your approval. I paused at the door, looking back at the family that had spent 3 years trying to break me down. I have evidence and leverage, and most importantly, I have freedom from people who think love is something you have to earn through humiliation. Jake was on his feet now, panic replacing confusion. Jennifer, wait, let's talk about this. Talk? I laughed, and it felt like the first genuine sound I'd made in that house. We're done talking, Jake. We're done with Sunday dinners and performance reviews and pretending this was ever about love. Mrs. Thompson found her voice, but it came out as a croak. I can't what? Defend myself? Refuse to be your victim? Take control of my own life? I shook my head. Watch me. And as I walked out of that house for the last time, I heard the beginning of what would become their complete unraveling. Raised voices, accusations, the sound of 3 years of carefully constructed lies finally collapsing under their own weight. But that was just the beginning, because while they'd been planning my humiliation, I'd been planning something much more thorough, something that would teach them exactly what happens when you underestimate a woman who's done playing by rules designed to keep her small. They wanted someone better for Jake. They were about to find out just how much better I could be at everything they thought they controlled. The real game was just beginning, and this time I was playing to win. The recording was just the appetizer. What I hadn't told them at that disastrous Sunday dinner was that I'd been building a case for months, not just against Mrs. Thompson, but against the entire system of manipulation that family had perfected. You see, while they thought I was just a quiet wife making apple pies, I was actually doing what I do best, following the money. And the Thompson family money told a very interesting story. 3 days after walking out of that house, I sat in my downtown office, the one Jake never bothered visiting because he assumed my work was just a job. My computer screen glowed with spreadsheets that would make Mrs. Thompson's European shopping trips look like pocket change compared to what I was about to reveal. "Ms. Rodriguez will see you now," my assistant announced. Emma Thompson walked in, her usual confidence replaced by something I'd never seen before. Fear. "Jennifer, please," she started, but I held up my hand. "It's Ms. Martinez now. I've reclaimed my maiden name." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Sit down, Emma. We need to talk." She perched on the edge of the seat like she might need to run. Smart girl. "I know what you're thinking," I continued, pulling up files on my screen. "You're wondering how much I actually know. You're hoping this is just about hurt feelings and Sunday dinner drama. You're praying I don't know about the trust fund." Emma's face went white. Bingo. "See, that's the thing about being a financial advisor specializing in asset protection. I notice patterns, like how Jake's trust fund, the one that's been supporting your mother's lifestyle for the past 5 years, has very specific stipulations about his marital status." I turned my laptop around so she could see the documents I'd pulled from public records, legal papers that painted a very different picture of the Thompson family finances than their Sunday dinner theater suggested. "Your grandmother was smart, Emma. She knew your mother's spending habits. So she structured Jake's inheritance with a fascinating clause. He only gets full access to the principal if he's married to someone the family trustee approves of. And guess who the current trustee is?" Emma's voice came out as a whisper. "Uncle Robert. Uncle Robert, who's been receiving very interesting phone calls from me this week." I leaned back in my chair, watching realization dawn on her face. "Turns out, he never approved of your mother's manipulation tactics. In fact, he's been looking for a reason to restructure the trust for years. This wasn't revenge. This was chess, and I'd been playing 3 moves ahead while they were still arranging the pieces." "Jennifer, please," Emma said, her mask finally slipping completely. "Mom doesn't know about Uncle Robert. She thinks the money just flows. She's been using Jake's credit to cover her expenses because she assumed the trust would always be there." "I know exactly what your mother has been doing," I said calmly. "The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Emma's eyes filled with tears, real ones this time, not the performed emotion I'd watched at Sunday dinners. "I tried to warn you that day in the kitchen. I tried to tell you something was wrong, but you chose your family over what was right." I softened my voice slightly. "I understand that, Emma. Really, I do. But understanding doesn't mean I'm going to let this continue." I pulled out another folder, this one thick with printed emails and text messages. "Your mother has been orchestrating this for months. The comments about better women, the strategic mentions of Jake's ex-girlfriends, the careful undermining of my confidence. She's done this before, hasn't she?" Emma nodded miserably. "Sarah lasted 8 months. Before her, there was Katie. She made it almost 2 years. Mom has this system. A system designed to keep Jake dependent and isolated while maintaining access to his trust fund." I shook my head. "Brilliant, really, except she made one crucial mistake." "What?" "She picked the wrong target." I closed the laptop and looked directly at Emma. "I don't break, Emma. I build cases, and the case against your mother is airtight." Emma was crying openly now. "What do you want? Money? I don't want your money." I stood up, moving to the window that overlooked the city. "I want accountability. I want your mother to understand that actions have consequences. And I want Jake to see exactly who he chose over his own wife." "Jake really did love you," Emma said quietly. He's been under Mom's influence for so long, he doesn't know how to think for himself anymore." I turned back to her, and for the first time since this all started, I felt something that might have been sadness. "That's exactly the problem, Emma. A man who can't stand up to his mother will never be able to stand up for his wife." My phone buzzed with a text from Uncle Robert. "Documents filed, trust restructured, effective immediately." I showed Emma the message. "It's done. Your mother's access to Jake's money has been cut off. The trust now requires family consensus for any distributions, and since Uncle Robert controls the majority vote—" "Oh God," Emma whispered, "she's going to lose her mind." "Probably, but that's not my problem anymore." I walked back to my desk, pulling out one final document. "However, I am willing to offer your family a way forward." Emma looked up hopefully. "Full disclosure, public apology, and Jake needs to complete therapy, real therapy, not just promises to do better. Oh, if he can prove he's serious about breaking these patterns, Uncle Robert might consider a modified trust structure." "And if we don't?" I smiled, but it wasn't warm. "Then I release everything, the recordings, the financial documents, the pattern of manipulation spanning multiple relationships. Social media is forever, Emma, and your mother's reputation won't survive the truth." Emma stared at me for a long moment. "You're not who we thought you were." "No," I agreed. "I'm exactly who I've always been. You just never bothered to look past the woman who made your favorite pie." She left my office 20 minutes later with a choice to make and a deadline to meet. 3 days to decide whether the Thompson family wanted justice or destruction. I thought I'd feel victorious. Instead, I felt empty. Winning a war against people you once loved doesn't feel like winning. It feels like surviving something that should never have happened in the first place. That evening, I sat in my apartment, my own space that I'd kept that throughout the marriage despite Jake's subtle pressure to consolidate our living situations. I'd always known, deep down, that I might need an escape route. My phone rang. Jake's name on the screen. "Jennifer, please, we need to talk." "I think we're past talking, Jake." Emma told me about the trust, about Uncle Robert, about— His voice broke. "About everything Mom did." I said nothing. "I know I messed up. I know I chose wrong. But Jennifer, I love you. I always loved you. I didn't know how to fight her." "That's exactly the problem," I said, echoing what I'd told Emma. "Love isn't supposed to be a battlefield where one person has to fight alone. I can change. I can learn. I'll do therapy. I'll set boundaries with Mom. Jake." I cut him off gently. "Do you know what the saddest part of all this is?" "What?" 3 months ago, if you just stood up for me once, just once, none of this would have happened. If you'd told your mother to stop her comments, if you'd defended our marriage, if you'd chosen us over her approval, I would have fought for our relationship forever. Silence on the other end, but you didn't. And now I've learned something terrible. I'm better off without people who require me to shrink myself to fit into their dysfunction. So that's it? 3 years of marriage, and you're just done? I looked around my apartment, my books, my art, my space that felt like home in a way the Thompson house never had. I'm not done, Jake. I'm finally beginning. What does that mean? It means I'm choosing better for myself, for my future, for the woman I want to become. I paused, feeling the weight of 3 years of trying to earn love that should have been freely given. It means I'm choosing me. Jennifer. Jake, I hope you get help. I hope you learn to set boundaries with your mother. I hope you find happiness, but I hope you find it without making another woman pay the price for your family's dysfunction. I hung up the phone and turned it off. Outside my window, the city lights twinkled like possibilities. Millions of them, all mine to explore without asking permission or measuring myself against someone else's impossible standards. 6 months later, I stood in my new office, twice the size of my old one, with windows facing the river and a nameplate that read, Jennifer Martinez, Principal Partner. The financial advisory firm I'd built specialized in helping women protect their assets during difficult divorces. Turns out my experience with the Thompson family had given me unique insights into how manipulation works and how to defend against it. Emma knocked on my door, looking healthier than I'd seen her in years. "How's Jake?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Better. The therapy is helping. He's starting to understand how deep Mom's control went." She sat down, no longer the nervous woman who'd begged for mercy 6 months ago. "He asks about you sometimes." "And your mother?" Emma's expression hardened slightly. Learning to live within her means. The condo downtown is nice, but it's not the mansion she's used to. She's adjusting. "And you?" For the first time since I'd known her, Emma smiled genuinely. "I'm good, really good. Turns out, when you stop enabling toxic behavior, you discover who you actually are underneath it all." She pulled out an envelope. "Jake wanted me to give you this." Inside was a simple card with a handwritten note. "Thank you for showing me what better actually looks like. I'm sorry it took losing you for me to find myself. Jay." I set the card aside without much emotion. "How's he doing? Really?" "He's dating someone new. Someone Mom actually likes, which should tell you everything you need to know about whether he's actually changed." Emma shook her head. "Some patterns take longer to break than others." "And that doesn't bother you?" "It used to. But then I realized something you taught me. I can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. I can only save myself." She stood to leave, then paused at the door. "Jennifer, for what it's worth, you were the best thing that ever happened to our family, even if we were too broken to see it at the time." After she left, I sat in my office looking out at the river, thinking about the woman who used to make apple pies for people who never appreciated them. She felt like someone from another lifetime, someone smaller, someone who believed love meant making yourself acceptable to people who would never accept you. The intercom buzzed. "Ms. Martinez, your 3 p.m. is here. Mrs. Williams, the divorce consultation." "Send her in." A woman walked into my office, her hands shaking slightly as she clutched a manila folder. She had the same look I'd once seen in my own mirror, the look of someone who'd been told she wasn't enough for so long that she'd started to believe it. "Mrs. Williams, please have a seat. I understand you're going through a difficult divorce." She nodded, tears already forming. "My husband's family, they've been telling him I'm not good enough, that he deserves better. And now he's—" She couldn't finish the sentence. I leaned forward, my voice gentle but firm. "Mrs. Williams, let me tell you something that took me 3 years of Sunday dinners to learn. Anyone who makes you feel like you have to earn their love doesn't understand what love actually is." She looked up at me, hope flickering in her eyes for the first time in months. "Now," I continued, opening my laptop, "let's talk about protecting what's yours and building a future where you never have to make yourself smaller to fit into someone else's story." As we worked through her case, I realized that the woman who'd walked out of the Thompson house 6 months ago had become something more than just someone who'd escaped a toxic situation. She'd become someone who could help others escape too. The sun set over the river, painting my office in golden light. I thought about Mrs. Thompson, probably sitting in her downsized condo, finally facing the consequences of a lifetime of manipulation. I thought about Jake, hopefully learning in therapy that love isn't supposed to come with conditions and performance reviews. I thought about Emma, discovering her own strength away from her family's dysfunction. And I thought about myself, not the woman who'd spent 3 years trying to earn acceptance, but the woman who'd learned that the only approval that matters is your own. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. "Dinner tomorrow? I'm making enchiladas." I smiled, typing back, "Absolutely, I'll bring dessert." Real family, I'd learned, doesn't require you to audition for your place at the table. It just makes room for you exactly as you are. The woman in the Thompson family photos, smiling hopefully in the background of someone else's story, was gone. In her place was someone who understood that better isn't about meeting other people's impossible standards. Better is about becoming the fullest, truest version of yourself. Better is about choosing people who celebrate your strength instead of demanding your weakness. Better is about walking away from tables where you're not truly welcome and building your own. One where everyone gets to belong just by being themselves. And that version of better, that was worth every difficult conversation, every burned bridge, every Sunday dinner I'd never have to attend again. As I locked my office and headed home to my own space, my own choices, my own beautifully imperfect life, I realized something that would have shocked the woman who used to pour tea for people who didn't deserve her service. I'd never been happier to be alone. Because alone meant free, and free meant anything was possible. The Thompson family had been right about one thing. Jake did need someone better. They just never understood that, so did I.